No, on this iPad that I have a very limited view. I only get 9 panels on each page. So
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah.
for the webinar mode, it'll just be us anyway. You're not gonna. We're not
Oh, really? I
seeing
won't see
anything.
anyone
Yeah.
else?
No, no. So you're
Oh,
stuck with just looking at us for the
oh, that
duration.
how
Sorry.
sad.
I know. It's pretty sad. I agree. It's kind of like, oh.
I thought I'd see some people. You know.
You like a little change of scenery every once in a while. All right. We have an early arriving crowd. That's great.
Yes, we do. Trying to help a couple of people get in.
All right. Well, for those of you just joining us, we're going to just give a couple minutes for everybody to join the Zoom webinar. So just give them a couple minutes, and then we'll hear from the mayor.
John, may I ask, can you see the participants?
Yeah, you go under attendees under the panelist thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
John, you're sounding like a tech who knows what he's doing.
You know, unfortunately, it's my life in the tech world was a lot of Zoom webinars, and our CEO was on the board of Zoom, and so we use Zoom for like the last 8 years when it was really spotty. So
Ah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's
All
much
right.
it's much for anybody that complains about Zoom now. It's like you have no idea. I've seen it 7 or 8 years ago. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I think we've got enough people to join that people can join in. So just real quickly, everybody, welcome to our monthly Coffee with the Mayor. And I'm John McCormick, president of the Chamber this year. And we're here with Jay Lifton and Mayor Mike Anderson. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to start with just the mayor giving us a little bit of a mini little update on what's going on in the city. Some of you have written in questions, which we're going to do first. And then we're going to take questions just through the Q&A panel that's there on in your Zoom video screen. But we'll go ahead and recap all that as soon as the mayor is done going through his update. All right. So, Mr. Mayor, can you take it away?
John, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining me for a coffee with the mayor. I have my cup of coffee here, so hopefully you have a cup there and you can enjoy this. We are in a very interesting situation. We are beginning to see some light in terms of the COVID-19 situation. We're getting signals from the county that we can begin to open up and improve access to different kinds of facilities. However, at the same time, the county now is on a watch list because of the increase in COVID-19 cases. So I guess this is an opportunity to kind of directly appeal to folks in Lafayette to make sure that you do everything you can to try to maintain social distancing, wear a mask even if you're just out walking. Because I think what happens then, people see that wearing a mask is okay, maybe they bring a mask along with them. We've got to go to that level. We have to have people being very careful so that we don't find ourselves suddenly having to go back into more of a lockdown mode. And that's what you're seeing across the country in some of the states. And it could happen here if in fact we're not being careful. So that's kind of where we are on that front. It's very good progress has been made. I know that the outdoor dining, Lafayette Circle, and in general, I think has been very successful. And I know Jay may want to comment about that at some point from the chamber's perspective, but I know that Courtney and I had a chance to walk and by everyone. They were all having a good time out there eating and saying hi and seeing friends from a social distance, appropriate social distance, and greeting folks. It's great to be out. It's great to be able to have a meal out. But once again, we just have to make sure that we're keeping those masks in place when we're not there eating, and we're actually taking care of social distancing rules and following them. In terms of the city budget, we just passed our city budget for the fiscal year coming at us, 2021. We ended up making cuts of about $975,000 to balance the loss of revenue that we're receiving, that we're going to receive from both the delay in sales taxes coming to us and a reduction in sales taxes in general from businesses being closed down during the pandemic. So the process of kind of going through and culling out things that could be done either later or reduced in scope was a bit trying, but we got through it. And I'm pleased to say that we now are looking at, in the next cycle, maintaining our budget reserve of 60%, which means that once again, if we have another emergency or another problem, we should be able to deal with it without any real difficulty. And I think that prudence is really what the hallmark of Lafayette. It's what we do here. And we've been doing it consistently for quite some time. So once again, we've been able to make the cuts. And I think that the effect, I think, will appear to be minimal for most folks in Lafayette. So I'm pleased with that. And it was not an easy task, but the council did that fairly quickly. The big news, of course, on the social front is the whole issue with Black Lives Matter and the concern about racism and systemic racism in our country. That's something that was really heavy on the minds of council members at our last meeting. We decided to actually form a 3-member council task force. So it will be a full committee. It will be one that follows Brown Act rules because there are 3 council members involved. Vice Mayor Candell, Councilmember Cam Burks, and Councilmember Teresa Geringer will be heading up the charge to begin a series of town hall meetings to begin to get a real sense of the issues that need to be addressed within the city of Lafayette and where people would like to see us going for the future. I think one of the issues that I'm noticing is that there's a definite connection with the schools that has to be reinforced. And I know that Councilmember Burks has been very interested in getting the school board involved in this task force. But we have a lot of folks in the community who have a great deal of interest and concern about how things have proceeded over the previous years in Lafayette and the effect that it's had on their children and people of color in general. So if this is something that you want to get engaged in, I think this forum is going to be a wonderful opportunity for all of us to gain a lot of good knowledge and to get to know each other a lot better. And I think for me, it's really about having conversations. If people begin to talk to each other and not simply call the police, I think that you might find that you meet somebody who's not too different than you. They just look different. But if you don't give that an opportunity, it's not going to happen. And then we end up in a cycle of people being basically profiled and becoming ostracized and feeling hurt when in fact they could be really part of the community like anyone else that you may know. So it's a tough situation. You know, 400 years is hard to change. It doesn't happen overnight. But I really sense a real positive interest in seeing this improve. So I'm hopeful this task force will be well attended. The town hall meetings will be very fruitful. And there'll be more on that as time goes on. We have had a couple of meetings of our public safety subcommittee, and they had Chief Aldrich in a session where he could actually answer questions. There were some inquiries into practices. Now, in case you don't know, our police services in Lafayette are actually contracted with the county sheriff's department. So although our police do have cars that say City of Lafayette and they have uniforms that say City of Lafayette Police, they actually are sheriff's staff. county sheriff staff. And so the protocols and the training that they receive is through the county sheriff's office. So it makes us more one step removed. I think in a lot of the situations you're seeing in many cities where people are complaining to their council or mayor about the situation with the police, they are the police that are hired and trained within the bounds of that city. In Lafayette, we contract for that service. So the questions now are going really to the county sheriff's department to see in detail what they're doing to address the issues that have come forward from the different tragic occurrences that happen around the country. And we're getting that information. It's very interesting to me to see the complexity of policing. Not something I've really studied, but there's so many laws that overlap each other that begin to create a pattern of what you can and cannot do as a police officer. So it's complex, but some of the simple questions like wearing body cameras, not having chokeholds as part of the normal protocol, to address people with a certain level of dignity. I think those, whether the laws are there or not, are something we can probably get straightened out pretty quickly. There's a lot of nuance, and that also will be an ongoing discussion as we get more information from the sheriff's department about that. As a contractor or contractee of that service, our real options in terms of changing any of those procedures are a bit limited. I mean, we will find, I think, that there are some things that we may or may not like. And if that's the case, we may need to negotiate a different kind of service for our community. And if we cannot get that, then we'll be back to that question that we asked, I think about 8 or 10 years ago. Would we be better off with our own police force? The problem with that is it's very expensive, and you end up with, times when you don't have police that you need because someone gets sick or injured. It's a very complex process to maintain and continue to have a police force that you have within the city. So the county's given us great service, and I think that they'll be responsive to the overall issue that's coming up on a nationwide level of concerns about treatment and racism within the police services. On a more positive note, we've got the protection plan, the funding from the Fed for businesses, payment protection plan. And I think at last count, we were at $1.4 million, something like that, 428.50, something like that. Anyway, Jay can certainly give us the number and we'll know exactly what it is. But I'm really pleased that this has been, to me, very successful in helping out small businesses as well as nonprofits in Lafayette. The idea to do this was one that Narup Travatsa, our city manager, and I kicked around at one point, and we were able to engage Townsend Public Affairs, our lobbyists, to do this work. At this point, we are keeping Townsend on contract at a month-by-month basis. And I believe that the reason that we're doing that is because some things are not yet resolved in terms of actual contracts that have gone out or applications. And there may be more funding coming. There seem to be indications from DC that there'll be another round or more money coming that may be useful to have Townsend Public Affairs there to help kind of broker those applications. So on a month-by-month basis, we'll be holding Townsend in place. And I think if you have a business or you're a nonprofit and you are interested, the city website is a good place to go to get good information about that whole program and how you can get involved. We've had a lot of legislation come down, and even in this very short session that the state legislators are in session. We actually went through, I think, about 9 or 10 bills at our last council meeting that were given to us with recommendations from Townsend Public Affairs that had been processed through the Leg Subcommittee, which is Councilmember Bliss and Councilmember Burks, with a great deal of discussion and input, I think, from folks. I think the overall effect, once again, is a concern about the loss of local control. And I think there's nothing in these bills that I see coming forward that's making it any more likely that that will change. It's just more pieces are being put in place that kind of limit what we can and cannot do when it comes to development in the city. And I know that's frustrating for all of us. Definitely frustrating for me and the council and the planning commission. But this is part of the push on the legislative level statewide to get additional housing. So we have two parts to this. One is the legislation that's being passed. And if you're interested in those bills and their status, and there's a question that was asked by one of the people called in early, we have the report that would be from our council meeting that has basically a listing of all the current bills that are in place from Towns of Public Affairs, as well as the letters that we have sent either in opposition or support of those bills, depending on the conversation at the Legislative Committee. But the other big shoe that's getting close to dropping is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA, as people call it. And RHNA is the next round of housing requirements that the city must incorporate into its plan for the city, the general plan, as well as the housing element from the general plan. So that set of numbers will tell us how many homes of moderate, low income, very low income housing the city needs to provide zoning to allow construction. The city does not have to build this housing, but it does need to create zoning opportunities so that people who are interested in building the housing can do so. At this point, we don't have the numbers, but we know that the overall number for the Bay Area is apparently 3 times what it was 6 years ago when we went through this process. So if we take a straight line look at this, we'll probably have 3 times as many houses required under RHNA, just looking at the numbers in terms of the overall demand for the Bay Area. However, there is a nuance to this, so there's always a little extra involved. And there's the Housing Methodology Committee, which is part of ABAG, that is looking at how to allocate these numbers, these required housing units. And they have a variation that takes all the housing and puts it in places where there is a lack of housing, or they put the housing mostly in places where there already is housing. There's a variation of the ways they can actually apply these numbers. And under that, we could see even more than 3 times the numbers that we had in the last cycle. So it's not clear to us where we're going to end up. We will be very active in lobbying and doing what we can to keep those numbers as low as we possibly can. But once again, this is something that we do not have control over. It's something that is coming down from the state, and as a subdivision of the state, the city has to comply with these requirements. So more to come on that when we get our RHNA numbers. I'm sure the word will get out to everyone about what that means. And speaking of housing, let me just touch on the Terraces project. I know there's still some concern and thought about what's going on with that. The Terraces project is currently at the Planning Commission. It is not at the City Council. All projects really end up going to the Planning Commission, and then if they're appealed by someone, they end up at the City Council. So the Terraces project, I think, is on its 3rd public hearing. Because of state law, the city can only have 5 public hearings on this project. And we have to complete the process of those 5 public hearings by about early August. And at that point, if the process has not been completed, my understanding is that the project is automatically permitted to go through. So once again, these are legislative requirements that are coming down from the state. The Permit Streamlining Act, the Housing Accountability Act. If you're an attorney, you'll love it. You can get to look at that and just opine all day about what they all mean. But for us, it appears to be that the Planning Commission will meet next week, probably for their third last meeting on the terraces. And then there will be, I am sure, no matter what the decision of the Planning Commission is, there will be an appeal, either by the developer or those in opposition of the project, and the appeal will then come to the City Council. At that point, the City Council will have no more than two public hearings that can be held on the project, and then we'll have to render a decision on the project by early August. It's a very difficult situation, I think, for folks in Lafayette, particularly those who live off of Pleasant Hill Road in that area. Traffic is a big concern as of today, and having more traffic related to this project is not something anyone's interested in seeing. However, the ability to use that or any other impact of this project as a reason to change it or turn it down are severely limited. In fact, probably zero. So I know there'll be more conversation with the Planning Commission. Once again, it's not in the City Council's hands right now. It's not before us. But this is the issue that we have in front of us. And then going basically to a project that just recently went through the City Council that kind of illustrates this point. And this is from a question from Dave Clark. And Dave Clark was interested in this construction proposal that's proposed by Sotheby's near the creek on Mount Diablo Boulevard, kind of across from the Veterans. And it's a 4-story condominium complex. The way the legislative process is set up, if a developer has a sufficient number of affordable units by percentage in their project, they are granted a certain number of concessions and an unlimited number of waivers to allow that project to go forward. And in the case of this, they're calling it the West End project, the waivers and concessions created the opportunity to build a 4-story, 12-unit condominium complex with minimal setbacks. And there was, once again, a lot of concern by people who live nearby about the appearance and the look of this. However, it came to the council because of the waivers and concessions. And there is really not anything that the city is allowed to do to prevent those from going forward unless it can demonstrate that they are not necessary to allow the project to be built. And it's a very high bar in terms of actually having that kind of control that we used to have before this legislation was in place. So that's an example, I think, of where the legislative process has gone and is continuing to go and continues to be a concern for us in Lafayette, and will certainly affect the Terraces project and other projects from the future. And with that, I'd just like to say that I think that we've got a good council in place, a good planning commission. We are really spending a lot of time with the lobbying firm and working on legislative opinions to make sure that we can do everything we can to maintain local control. We can certainly use your help as residents in the city. And if you can understand the positions we're in, then channeling your worries and concerns toward those who make the rules are something that we can certainly help coordinate if you're interested in doing that. So with that, John, I'll take questions. Yeah. I think you've got some already queued up.
We do, yeah. We got some good ones already. I'm going to start with a couple more that came in early, and thank you very much for responding to some early questions, and then we'll take the ones that are coming in during the meeting. Okay. And just a reminder, you can for all the attendees, the Q&A panel there, right to the, I think on the bottom of your video, you can enter a question, and then we'll get to it right away. A couple of questions that came in early though, Mr. Mayor. One was, I think about fireworks. I know this is a question I think is happening all around the Bay Area. about hearing, fireworks at night, and that's probably just going to get more and more intense as we get closer to the 4th of July, especially with no public ceremonies happening. Is there anything that, well, I guess I think the question probably nets down to, is there anything the city can do or is doing, and what should residents do if they are concerned?
Well, I think that there is a concern because we live in a high fire danger area. So we want to make sure that people are not lighting off fireworks. And to be quite honest, I had a neighbor about a year ago who was shooting off fireworks, big fireworks. These weren't the little tiny ones, they were big ones. And we had to talk to them about that. So I think there's kind of a variation of response. If you know where it's coming from and who's doing it, you can, if you feel comfortable, approach those folks and try to find out if they're aware of the danger that they're creating for our community. If you don't feel comfortable or you don't really know where that's happening, then clearly report it to our police. And the problem with fireworks, like a lot of things that are spontaneous, is that it happens, and unless it happens on a regular basis, it's very difficult for anyone to actually go in and enforce anything. So you have to be very patient, and you have to be pretty much right there with the dial, the speed dial, to get a response that may in fact be effective. But police clearly will be interested in that kind of occurrence.
All right, great. Yeah, so it is important to do, and we should probably expect more of it, unfortunately. The second one from Sarah also, just to net it out, she had a concern about just how to approach in the same manner door-to-door salespeople, especially not wearing a mask, and especially during the modified shelter-in-place we've got. What does the city have any rules, or what should people expect? Kind of what's the norm? What is allowed and not allowed right now as far as that goes?
Well, people who are going door to door are supposed to go through the police department and get permission to do so. So now the problem is that if you are worried about COVID-19 and the person who comes to the door doesn't have a mask on, then you probably really don't even want to talk to them because clearly they're not going to be respectful of your distance at that point. So you can not open your door, you can look through your door or say, go away. I mean, if you're worried about the maskless solicitor, I don't have a great answer for you. Put your mask on. If you're going to confront them, ask them to step back away from the door and address them with either you're concerned that you don't want their solicitation or that you'd like to see proof that they have permission to be soliciting in Lafayette, and they'll either have that or they won't. If they don't have it, then once again, they should not be doing it. Now, if this is reoccurring, once again, you can call the police, because if you have someone who's going on a regular basis, going around, and you see them, the police can find that person and then ask them, what are they doing, and inform them that they need to have an actual permit to be soliciting. It's interesting, this question that we got is for pest control. And
right.
Typically pest control people don't go door to door. So
yeah, that was interesting.
I don't know what's going on with this particular company, but clearly they need to have permission to do solicitation door to door. And if they're bothering you, then you tell them, I'm not interested, and get the police to come out and check them out.
Yes. No, good points. I think a related question, but one that I think we'll address, also related to, I think, shelter in place and more garbage being generated because we're all home doing more things. What are the rules, I guess, or just, I think Pat just asking kind of what's the procedure if somebody is, decided to use their overflow garbage and your own garbage and so on. I mean, it's also one of the many unintended issues we have going on right now. Any thoughts on that?
It's a little tricky. I don't quite know how we enforce it, but I think that once again, there's kind of two levels to this thing. The first level, the hopeful level, is the person is someone that you know, or they're from your neighborhood, and you can hopefully, if you feel safe, confront them and say, look, you shouldn't be doing this. What's the problem? Now, if you're not comfortable with that, which you may not be, and that's perfectly fine, then I think that between, once again, police who are not going to be real excited about monitoring garbage cans, or Republic Services, who is the contractor for our garbage pickup. In fact, they might be a better one to contact. If this is a regular occurring thing, once again, there's a chance that they can actually contact the person doing it. If it's an occasional or, you know, one-time, one-off situation, it's not going to be possible for anyone to do much about it at all. So I think Republic Services would be a good place to go to let them know that you have a problem if it's recurring enough that they can actually expect to find the person out there doing it on a regular basis.
Fair enough. Great. Next one comes from Dave Clark, who's always good for some good questions. And
well, I replied to Dave Clark before. This is on the
you
four-story building.
I think so, the question I also wanted to do, though, yes, on the four-story building, and he was just specifically asking, which I think is just good to ask, just generally, are we going to see more of this? Right? Is this something that we should just expect as a new normal? That with the city's less control, we're going to get a little more developers pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the thing that the good thing about Lafayette is a great community. It's got great schools. It's got really cool people, and it's a nice place to live. The bad thing about Lafayette is that that's a place where people want to build more housing because it's a great place to live. So why wouldn't you want to live there? You can sell it for a lot of money too. So, you know, it's kind of, we've got a good thing. Everybody wants in on a good thing. That's the way life works. The legislative process is definitely making control very difficult for the city. So yes, we can expect more of this kind of development.
Yeah, fair enough. Great. And just, I think the last question that we're going to talk about that was submitted early, and then maybe we'll turn over to Jay to talk a little bit about the chamber updates before we go back to you. Which is a question on, I think, again, shelter in place kind of things, social distancing with gardeners and leaf blowers and things like that. I think similar to some of the questions we've had already, it's like, you know, it's the people, especially if they're doing leaf blowers with their headsets on or just kind of doing, gardeners are not respecting potentially social distancing guidelines. Is there any guidance you can give or things, is it, what would you say as far as answers to some of the concerns about that?
Well, I know it's a problem. I think the way the police handle it is that they will contact the owner of the property that is being maintained and inform the owner that they need to make sure that the people working on their property are following the proper guidelines for wearing a mask as well as social distancing. So I believe Chief Aldred, that is his approach. He basically goes to those who are being maintained and gets them to be the enforcer of the requirement.
Great, that makes sense. So I'd like to maybe, and again, if anybody has any questions for the mayor, if you go ahead and enter them in the Q&A panel there at the bottom. What I want to do is just turn over to Jay Lifton just for a few minutes, Jay, to give us a little update on what's going on with the chamber and openings, restaurants, parking meters, maybe some updates you can give everybody on that.
Thank you, John. Yeah, in spite of the fact that COVID epidemic is growing, particularly in the Bay Area, we continue to find ways to get businesses open. Starting next Wednesday, July 1st, pretty much the rest of the businesses that have not been opened up until now will open their doors for business, unless our governor makes a decision like the governor of Texas did yesterday, where they'll put a hold on those openings. I don't think that will happen. That's just a guess. But the only businesses that will not be open by July 1st will be any kind of businesses that have to do with facials or anything getting really close to someone's face. Other than that, the rest of the businesses will open. And then regarding large gatherings and so on, that is something that's not even considered at this point. So, so what this means is restaurants will be able to open next Wednesday, and that will be indoors as well as the outdoor area that they've been allowed to use through some changes in in our code right now that the City Council has approved. And we don't know yet, it has not been determined what percentage of seating restaurants will be able to use. But again, there's probably going to be a certain amount of our population that's not going to be comfortable sitting indoors anyway. So that might solve its own problem. Regarding parking, I was looking to see if Bob Powers was on the line there. I didn't see him as an attendant yet, but there was a statement that was put out by ParkSmart, and they're the company that controls the meters inside the private lots like Lafayette Square. And they put out a statement a couple of days ago that said that they're working on a theory of if there's more than 85% of the parking spaces available, they're not going to make any changes right now and start collecting money. But once we sort of hit that 85% level, where then parking is at a premium, they will begin collecting money. Now, I know that our city manager made a call yesterday to find out what that's actually going to look like. But I know some signs have gone up in Town Center and over by Cooperage and Farmyard Darlings that says that as of Wednesday, the parking meters will be enforced again. There's big yellow signs on those parking meters, so it may not mean all of them. The city will continue to have free parking on the street. Even though the meters don't necessarily all say that, you don't need to put any money in the meters, and that will probably go at least, I believe, until August. I think that's something that's a moving target as well. Regarding, some of the issues that you were talking about earlier regarding the difference between compliance and enforcement, this is a real difficult one for our police department. The police department or the sheriff's department have had no participation in putting these rules out. It's been the state of California and our county health department that the county's relying on. But basically whatever they call, it's now the police department's responsibility to enforce it. And I know that in talking to our police chief, Ben Aldrett, they're working on an education basis, not necessarily penalizing people. It's basically getting people to do the right thing. And so we all have to lead by example. And I can tell you that if we don't get a little bit better at enforcing our own movement, we could be seeing the closing of our economy again, and that would be a real shame. Because when you paint that picture with a broad brush and you close everything down, there's many businesses that are very safe to still do. And so we'd like to see the opportunity for our businesses to be able to thrive during this time. And traffic is back and business is picked up. And it was a great scene downtown last weekend with a lot of people going out and keeping distance. Just like at the march that we had, I barely saw a person without a mask. And people have been very respectful. So, but there are people that just completely disagree with it, and you just have to stay away from them. One of the things that also opens up next week is bars. And the ABC has been very kind to allow bars to go ahead and move outside as well. So the Roundup is really excited about opening up next Wednesday. They've done a beautiful job of putting together a temporary patio so that they can take care of more customers than what they can do inside. And they've put up shields inside around the bar. They've done a fantastic job. A lot of businesses have gotten really creative. They have found ways to enlarge their space to do business, retail, or restaurants, and still keep people safe. So that's been fantastic. We were talking a little bit about the loans. There is still money available in both the payroll protection program and the EIDL, which is this small business loans. There is money available. People should still, if they're thinking that they that this would be helpful for them right now, they should absolutely apply. The first thing they do is go to the city's website and they'll fill out a verification form that their business is in Lafayette. And then they'll get a call from Townsend who will go over what the options are for them. So I highly encourage any businesses that are on the call today to make sure they take advantage of that. So that's sort of where we are from the chamber's standpoint. We continue to operate remotely. We are taking meetings one-on-ones by appointment only in the office, and we'll if things go well, our plan is to open up the office to the public again after the 4th of July holiday.
Terrific. Thanks, Jay. And I know we are a small business. We did talk to Townsend. It was very helpful and not scary at all. So definitely worth doing. Got nothing to lose, basically. One thing good.
I would just like to say that there's been a lot of moving parts over the last 100 days with the different agencies, and I really want to give kudos to Candace Anderson and Lori Byers and their office. They have been so available to help answer questions and find solutions, and they've got a lot of cities and a lot of municipalities to work with, and we're really fortunate to have people that are been so caring about our community. Thanks.
Right. And Jay, do you want to just briefly touch on the street closures? What's the planning and the timing for those? Right, because we've got a couple different phases.
So really the only street closure that we have going right now is in front of Tutu's and the coffee shop. So that's 50 Lafayette Circle. The street closure starts at 4 o'clock this afternoon and goes through Sunday evening. Then we'll take it down and open the street back up during the week. That will at least be working this weekend and next. No issues there. It's easy to get around. There is a detour that will take you right around. All the driveways are open. Businesses are very accessible, including yours, John. You just said when you pull out of your lot, you'll have to turn left instead of right.
That's right.
But we'll be doing outdoor dining. We have been encouraging restaurants to sort of take and occupy some of that sidewalk and or parking lot spaces. Some of them have decided to do it, some haven't. So I think it's maybe it's just a matter of supply and demand too. We may not have reached that point yet where they need that many seats, but yeah, that's the only street closure.
Okay.
There may be more coming, there may not. One of the things that's being discussed would be to close down Mount Diablo Boulevard on the weekends and make that more of a walking mall where families could at least get out and sort of be in the public, but with great social distancing at the same time.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Jay. All right, Mr. Mayor, a couple questions have come in for you. One, Dave Clark did ask, you touched on a little bit, but I think just perhaps a little more clarity on the Terraces timing, Deer Hill project timing, and the 5-meeting rule. So there's a question of do the 2 city council meetings, that you're talking about, those count toward the 5-meeting limit rule law that's now in place?
Yes, they do. And so this is part of the Permit Streamlining Act, which has been in place for a while. And it basically allows a maximum of 5 public hearings on a project, which I think starts after the filing of the environmental document. So 3 will be, the third one meeting on the Terraces that's under this deadline will be next week. And as I said, if they make a decision, then it will go to the city council as an appeal, and the council will have 2 more to decide on the project. So it's 5 total, all told.
Okay. So it's moving along. Yeah, you got to pack a lot into every single meeting nowadays. Thank you. Another question, just, and if you can comment, or Jay, I don't know if somebody comment on, there's quite a bit of utility work going on around Mount Diablo Court and St. Mary's Road. Are you familiar with that? What's going on there?
I think Larry's on the line. He might be able to tell you about what's happening on Lafayette on Mount Diablo Court. And there has been a lot, but there have been some PG&E projects that have been taking place. I think they've been pretty well publicized. Some of it having to do with the gas lines, something having to do with removal of trees. Larry, you want to follow up on that?
I think Larry's having some audio issues, which is why he asked the question for somebody else to do it.
I think Larry's on Highway 5 somewhere. Yeah.
But he's the he's the expert. All right. Well, excellent. Thank you very much. You know, at the moment, I think we're out of. There's no more questions coming in. I think Mayor, you did a great job addressing a lot of the key issues facing the city, and that's really terrific. I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add in closing, or Jay? Anything else you want
I
to
have a question. I have a question for Mike that I hadn't heard answered yet, and that was, you know, you were talking about the difference between having your own police department and contracting from the county. Has the city identified particular police practices that the sheriff's department currently employs that our community would have a hard time with?
Well, that's the task really of the Public Safety Committee, and I have not seen a report from that meeting yet. So I'm assuming that when we get it, it will outline concerns that we have based upon the protocol that the Sheriff Department uses. And then we're stuck with basically appealing to the Sheriff's Department to either modify within our boundary those practices, or we were faced with the question of, okay, then do we need to have our own police services? So that's where we are at this point. We haven't seen the report, but that should be something that's gone into in detail.
Thank you.
All right. Great. Oh, okay. There, a question did come in that's probably worth. It's a big question. I think you did touch on it earlier, Mayor, but just to kind of bring it a little more focus to it, the desire to limit affordable housing in Lafayette. The desire to limit affordable housing in Lafayette sends a message that we do not want to create space in our community. How do we start to move forward toward a more inclusive approach to welcome others?
Well, I think that there's kind of a balancing point here that has to be recognized. We want a diverse community. We have a diverse community to some extent. It could be much more diverse. And there's a lot of housing that is rental housing that is fairly affordable considering rents in the Bay Area. But more housing is needed. The problem is when it's left to a state agency or the Bay Area governments to decide how much housing they're going to have, then it's difficult for us to process that in a way that it fits our community and everyone's happy with the result. Planning is a really tough process by itself. If you have a legitimate proposal for a project, of course, the neighbors aren't going to be happy with the changes. The neighborhood is not going to be happy. There's a lot of issues that normally 5 or 10 years ago would go through kind of a hashing process with the Planning Commission, with design review, to make the project as acceptable and compatible as we possibly make it. Those things are going away, and the control over where the housing is also going away. So I think that what's happening is that we're going to get a more diverse community, but it's going to be one that may offend some folks as opposed to being integrated into our community in a thoughtful and positive way. That's my concern. We're going to get more diversity, there's no doubt, and that's a good thing. And we're going to get more housing, we need more housing. But the question is, can you do it in a way that makes it fit overall and not become something that becomes a flashpoint for argument and kind of really ostracization of those who come in? Because those who come in through those projects that have such controversy, first thing they face is a lot of neighbors who aren't happy that they're there. And hopefully we can work through that in a process that's much more inclusive.
Thank you very, very much.
John? John?
Yeah, Jen, yes.
One last question for the mayor, and Mike.
Yeah, we have one more coming in too. So
okay,
go ahead,
Mike. You know, in watching news and watching late night shows now, and it is an election year, you always see that on interviews that they try to get the politician to commit to running for vice president or president or whatever. So you can take me out back and beat the crap out of me later after I ask you this question. But are you going to be rerunning for election for city council in Lafayette?
I have yet to decide. I'm
Okay.
working it out with Courtney. It's a process.
I should have
You
asked
know,
Courtney.
I've been doing it for 16 years. I think that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So we'll see.
Nice, Jay. Nice little. You gotta try. Hey, why not? Just a couple other questions that just came in before we wrap up, Mayor. One is, and this question was asked written from Gwen about the position of our we know the position of our legislators on the housing bills, especially the ones that the city is kind of paying attention to and tracking. So I don't know if we know that in particular, or how we respond to that.
Well, the way we do this is that when we have our opinion, we CC our opinion to our legislative delegation. So Steve Glazer, Rebecca Bauer-Kahan get our positions on all these different things. Typically, we're finding good support from both legislators, both in the state Senate and in the representative group. So I don't know day by day what they're hearing, because remember, Rebecca Bauer-Kahan represents San Ramon, Danville. I mean, she has a large area. It's not just us. And Steve Glazer represents Antioch, Pittsburgh, and Walnut Creek. So he has a large area. And so we're one of the different communities that's giving them our sense of this thing. So they're at the switch yard. They're there to move things. We've seen great support for everything that we've been proposing, and it's really they have to negotiate the deal. And sometimes it doesn't come out the way you like, but at least you have someone in there representing your ideas. So I'd say we have good support.
Right. Fair enough. Great. And maybe the final question, just to kind of wrap it, bring it back up to the Terraces project, which was, I think there's a little concern with some of the organizations perhaps that oppose Terraces. If, as you say, it's moving forward with a kind of there's only so much the city can do.
Right.
Kind of at the end, are we going to be able to, we don't want to be stuck in endless lawsuits. They're going to be very expensive to the city. Have we thought about how we're going to kind of help try to bring this to a closure with some of the groups that oppose Terraces?
Well, I don't know that there's any way you can avoid the lawsuits, because the whole idea of a lawsuit is you don't like the decision that was made, and therefore you file a lawsuit. So yeah, it's really up to those who file lawsuits or have a concern whether they want to pursue that or not. And I think you're going to see lawsuits continuing. So that's just the way the world works.
Right. I think with the city's budget and everything, the spending money on lawsuits is even more concerning than it would otherwise be. I think is the concern. So
yes, we've spent a lot of money. Yes.
All right. Excellent. Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much as usual. I think that we answered everybody's questions, and as usual, it's been very, very interesting and illuminating.
Good.
So thank you very much. And Jay, thanks a lot to the chamber for organizing this great environment. All righty. Excellent. All righty.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. All right. We'll talk to everybody later. Have a good Friday and a good weekend.
Take care.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.